Hello and welcome back. This is Metropole Business Center with me, Fred Makori, and now we are joined by William Ramogi, who's going to break it down to us and tell us how it is, what does it mean for you and for me. We've had it being spoken here and there, the public debt issue. But before we get to it, I just want to pick your brain, William. What's your opinion on the judgment that was just passed on BBI?
The judgment was in order, and of course there were several benefits in the BBI, one of them being more devolved resources going to the ground. We would have seen 35% of our budget going to the counties. We would have seen increased services, better health services, would have seen better representation. But, you know, the process was less than the legal fraternity believed was satisfactory. And so we accept the verdict, and I think we are ready to move on as a nation.
All right. I'm tempted to ask you a lot of more questions on it, but that's not the topic of our discussion today. So, public debt, yeah? Where are we? Could you paint a picture of where we are as far as public debt is concerned in our country, Kenya?
We are not exactly at a good place. As of June this year, the government of Kenya, or the people of Kenya, owed a total of 7.3 trillion Kenya shillings, both to the domestic and external lenders. Domestic lenders are mainly the banks, you and I, when we buy the treasury bonds, and the corporate lenders. The international lenders are bilateral arrangements, which is single standing countries like China, Germany, France, Denmark, etc. And then there's the multilaterals, which are the IMF, the World Bank, etc. And then, of course, we have, you know, the commercial lenders like the Exim Bank of China and the Eurobond lenders that gave us Eurobond 1 and 2. And so it's a big debt burden, because as of that time, of course, it's standing at over 70% of GDP. Now, the World Bank threshold for a healthy debt to GDP ratio for a developing economy like ours is at most 64%. We passed that threshold, I think, as early as 2019. And so where we are is we are at a risk level in terms of debt management. It's not critical, but it is also not advisable to be having such a high debt burden. Conversations with the national government and some of the lending institutions like the IMF indicate that they are comfortable with the debt level because, one, we still have a lot of exports, so that they are now not using the traditional indicators. Two, our productivity is still high, which is interesting because if you look at our balance of payments, we are importing more than we are exporting. Yeah. Our productivity has been significantly affected by high energy costs on one hand, and on the other by COVID-19. And so many companies have moved out of the country because of the situation as it is. All right. So yes, we are not in a good place in terms of our debt management. Right.
All right, and we, as you said, we are not in a critical place yet, but not advisable. Let's talk a bit about the ballooning of the public debt. You know, in the recent past, we've seen it grow more than it has ever grown in the history of our country. The question then we would ask, or somebody would ask, is it justifiable? Do we have anything to show for it?
That's a very good question. During Kibaki's tenure, our debt to GDP ratio was well under 20%. We did very well economically. As early as 2006, we had reached 7% growth annually. This was only slowed down by the post-election violence of 2007-2008. But on average, in that final term of President Mwai Kibaki, despite the challenges of a grand coalition government, he did an average of 5% growth every year. Now, if you look at both terms of President Uhuru's presidency, he's also done an average of 5% every year. However, to deliver 5%, he has had to borrow to the level of 70% debt to GDP ratio. In other words, he's borrowed more than 3 times what Kibaki borrowed, and has delivered only the economic growth that Kibaki delivered. And so it's not a good place to be. It means that there's inefficiencies, there's the significant inefficiencies in the economic model that has been adopted by this government. Usually when the debt to service ratio is that high, what you see is that the economy is losing potential to grow at least 1.6% is being wasted or is gone as wastage, because, for example, now we are servicing the debt at around 1 trillion shillings every year. That is about 2.8 billion per day. Yeah, just going to service debts.
Wow.
Both locally and internationally. So that's a bit too high, if you ask me.
All right, and let's break it down to the common mwananchi, the mamamboga, the guard at the gate. What does that mean, the employee, the businessman? What does that then translate to? What impact does this have on them and their day-to-day business?
It means higher taxes to pay off the loans. So that means that of the money you get, say if you are to get 10,000 shillings and the government was to tax 1,000, again, this is hypothetical. You probably won't be taxed at that level. With the taxes, it means then that that goes to maybe your income goes to 8,500 because more money needs to be deducted from you to pay off the loans. The second thing it means is that there is inflation. The cost of goods go high. Usually when the taxes go high, the cost of goods go high. And so if you had that 8,500 and you are to use it to buy items, what it could buy a few years back, it can no longer buy. We'll probably need 12,000, 13,000 to buy the same thing that the 8,500 would buy. The sum total of this is that our disposable income as a society has gone lower, which means we are not buying as much as we used to. We are either we become very careful and start saving, and that means less money is in the economy and less money is being multiplied through economic activities, or we just spend on the basic items that we have, and by the time the money is over, hopefully the next income is coming. So there's general things. And when there's no things, no investment. And when there's no investment, no employment. It is a cyclical chain of poverty where we are leading towards. And this is why we say that high debt ratios lead to low economic growth, because the value of the money has gone down, and because of that, then you're looking at a population that does not produce as it used to.
Yeah. You've put in a very important point there. It results to a chain of poverty. Now, sticking there a bit longer, you as an economist, then what would be your take on it? I mean, if you were given the leeway to advise the powers that be, what would you advise as far as the public debt is concerned?
Isn't it a bit too late for that?
I mean, we are here now. Looking at the situation now.
Yeah. the situation is dire. I think, first of all, they have started with the easy fix. The easy fix is renegotiation. And earlier in the year, they went to the G20, the G7, and tried to renegotiate. The G7 is France, Germany, US, and a few Scandinavian countries. And we do not, we owe them a significant amount of money. So if they can, just suspend repayment for a few months, that would add value. But they have only suspended it to December 2021, which means by January we are back where we are, and January is still within this financial year. So it's not like we are that safe. It's just we've postponed a problem. The second guys they talked to the Chinese, just to suspend the repayment, and that's a step in the right direction. The structural issue of how we have, modeled this economy have not been approached, and our modeling has been that we invest more in infrastructure and less in people, or more in brick and mortar development and less in human development. That has not been significantly changed, because that has to change, because that is what has driven us where we are, where you have great infrastructure and less productivity. And so...
Sorry, we lost you a bit there.
So it cannot repay yourself. So you're forced to use the government revenue to pay the infrastructure, as opposed to the infrastructure repaying itself. At the same time, you have groups and groups of people who are unemployed and unable to contribute to the national revenue because there's little development of skills, there's little youth development activities that have gone on.
Yes.
And so that model significantly needs to shift.
Yes.
I'm glad that even as a country right now, prior to 2022, the discussions we are having are around economic models, and the proposals that are on the table are worth talking about.
Yes.
Certainly, I have my reservations about some of them, but it's a good place to be that we're actually discussing economic models and not my tribe and his tribe.
All right. That's very, very important, even as we head into the 2022 electioneering period, and also even for the citizens to interrogate, because we've been here, we've done this, seen this, but as we go into the 2022 electioneering period, how do we interrogate the people who are coming to ask for votes from us? And as we come to the close of this discussion, William, how does the future look like as far as the public debt is concerned in our country for the citizens? What is the future looking like? I know you started touching on it a bit.
Treasury, and I think the IMF estimate that by end of this financial year, we should have borrowed by reached 8.9 trillion in terms of borrowing. So we are going to borrow some more. And what this means is less services for the people. What this means is for any services that we need, like even vaccines, we will have to rely heavily on the generosity of well-wishers. We are not able to carry ourselves properly, even in the midst of a pandemic. So the future doesn't look very attractive, and I think that's why next year's election is very important, that we get it right in terms of people who can actually manage this economy, because we are at a bad place. In terms of what options are there for you and I, regular Mwananchi, I think the options that are there is just try and find ways of investing, because more and more the money in your pocket is losing value with every shilling that the Kenyan government borrows. The repayment amount of 1 trillion is quite high and unsustainable, really, and it needs to be addressed. I know we have had some reprieve of around 100 billion, but still that leaves us only with 900 billion to pay per month, per annum, and it's still very high.
Yeah. All right. As we come to the close, what are your final remarks, William?
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be at Metropole TV, and I think this is my first time at Business Center, and it looks a lot better than other shows. You should invite me more.
Well, my producer is going to kill me for that, but thank you very much for the compliment, and thank you very much for making time to come and have this discussion with us. Definitely first time, but not the last time. We shall be calling you again to just dissect some of these economic issues that we are facing as a country. Thank you, William.
Thank you.
All right, and that brings us to the close of this part of the show. We are coming back after the break with sports, and John Makali will be taking us through.